All right, everyone. Welcome to the Creative Outcomes Podcast. On today's episode, you have myself, partner Craig Baldwin. You also have Meredith Pickrell, who's a senior controller with Upsource. You've seen her on previous podcasts. We have a slightly different topic today. So, we're not going to talk about finance per se. We're not going to talk about ops. We're not interviewing a client about what they've been through as they've created their agency. We're actually going to talk about sales and what we see as success. If I think about the 125 agencies our organization works with every day, Meredith is working with many of them. Um, what are patterns of success in those agencies? Who are performing well? How many salespeople do they have? What are the comp structures that they have in place? Um, how much of their revenue is net new business versus current accounts? And when should you look to hire additional salespeople? I think that's another question that a lot of our organizations who are really in that they're leaving kind of build mode, going to grow mode, and hoping to scale soon. They're thinking about, do I hire more salespeople, and what's the appropriate amount to pay them? And I think for any organization, even hiring your first salesperson is a pretty big bet. It feels very risky. You've probably been promised a lot of things by a lot of candidates, and it's hard to determine who you can trust and who's going to add value to your organization. And maybe most importantly, how quickly, right? I think most of us look to external salespeople or services and hires as a near term fix or a band aid on the ills of our business, which relate to top line revenue. Um, but I think setting expectation both externally and internally is imperative to seeing success. And this is something that we both had a lot of experience working with clients on. So with that, Meredith, how are you? What's going on? Where are you located? It looks like maybe we're at home today. And where would you like to start with this really beefy topic?
Yeah, I feel like we've got lots of different ways. Let's just go with what I'm seeing a lot right now. Part of our value that we add to clients constantly is they want to know what their competitors or their peers are doing and how they're doing and what we're seeing. And so, one of the things that I'm seeing is just the narrative right now is the top of the funnel. The close rate is just slow. Sales are sluggish. What do I do about it? Do I hire someone to help me come in and, as a contractor part-time for lead gen? Do I invest in another sales hire? What do I do? I'm an owner of a, $3 to $5 million agency. Where do I start? What do I do?
Yep. Yep. Um, and I think what's ironic about a lot of our clients is as marketing agencies, they probably lean pretty heavily on the marketing side of things and probably not as heavily as they should on the quote unquote sales, or maybe just better said, less scalable tactics in order to drive business. If you were to think about the clients, so you talked about clients who maybe are facing challenges, what they're seeing, what they're feeling, the questions they're asking themselves. Do you have any clients that are doing well or at least above average? And like, what separates them from their peers, you think?
Yeah, that's another question I often get, and my answer is the winners. I don't know if that's the right term to use. The people that are doing better in your portfolio are the ones that have an account management focus. So they're going in and they're growing existing current relationships, and instead of constantly be going out and trying to find the next project, the next new logo. How do we grow our existing portfolio of client relationships? And um, eh, so those are the ones that I see doing well or better than the others that are constantly trying to go out and land the next logo.
Yep, yep. And so maybe that's an important distinction as we talk about this topic is while all of these activities tie to top line revenue, we tend, or at least I tend to think about them in somewhat of a bifurcated manner, which is I have sales slash business development, which ties to net new logos. And then I have the account management function, which is managing existing relationships and hopefully in a perfect world, growing those relationships, although we know that's not always possible. And sometimes we're managing the winding down of relationships. if you were to put a percentage for any agency, whether they're 2 million a year, maybe up to 8 million a year, whatever that looks like in annual revenue. If you were planning, we're already into 2025, but let's say we're planning for 2026. What percentage of their revenue, no matter how much they're trying to grow, would you expect to come from current accounts versus net new business, or what we might call new logos?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, like, we're trying to go after a 70-30 split of 70% coming from existing and 30% coming from net new. In practice, that's not necessarily what is happening. I mean, I've got people that have the inverse of that, where 30% is coming from existing logos and 70% is coming from new logos. And that's primarily due to project-based work.
Okay. And would you say that those types of clients, I think it's also important to distinguish between, there are agencies who do sort of one or two time project based work for many clients, right? So let's say if I'm a digital shop and maybe I'm a branding shop and I do a lot of branding exercises throughout the year, but they're for distinct clients. Or I do a lot of website designs, maybe for a .com, and that's for a new client every time. I guess for those types of businesses, which are very I don't know, while the services may be similar, they have a high client mix, if you will, and clients are coming in the front door and then usually leaving out the back with some type of, I don't know, small retaining service thereafter, whether that's maintenance or whatever. Those are probably the types of clients that have like 70% new business, 30% existing. Is that fair? Yeah. Yeah. And I will be the first to admit to you, in my experience, both running a consultancy, working at a large digital firm that was a part of the WPP portfolio, and then just interfacing with clients, that model of business or that model of agency is really freaking hard, because you have to have such a high throughput of clients that you do probably lean or rely heavily on your sales and marketing engine to continue to bring the next project in. And I do think there have been certain, I don't know, trends in the industry, which have made those very profitable, very high growth types of models, whether that's the boom of the internet and everyone needing a .com, whether that was social media, whether that was digital advertising, and maybe the near term answer is AI. I don't know. Could be mobile. Like there have been lots of trends that if you've moved to the next trend and adapted your services and you continue to service that high throughput, and you probably have some sort of specialization strategy. So you provide that service to a certain industry. By the way, upsource accounting is a perfect example of this model. Um, you can do well, right? But it is really, really hard. It puts a lot of stress on your sales and marketing team. It puts a lot of success on your operational excellence. And when those industries, or those trends tend to wind down, that is a really hard business to run. You end up kind of catching a falling knife, and unless you can pivot to a couple large clients, you just see a huge variability in your top line revenue. In my experience, do you think that's a fair statement?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. In your opinion, you know, I know the difference between this, but for the audience, like, talk to me about the difference between sales and marketing and how much of my total spend I should be like, what's the breakdown and where I should be spending my time between sales and marketing efforts.
Hmm, that is a great question. And of course, it depends on the services you're providing and what market you're providing them to. As a general rule of thumb, like Upsource as an example, we tend to, for all of our sales and marketing, we just kind of lump into one category within our P&L, and we do not want to spend over 10% of projected top line revenue on sales and marketing. And I think that's a pretty good benchmark for most agencies, because professional services, as you know, is hard. It comes with an extreme amount of variability. There are a lot of peaks and valleys, and so on average, if I'm getting close to 50% gross margin, which would be an excellent professional service firm, and I'm getting close to 25 or maybe even 30% net operating income, which would be an excellent professional service firm. you you're probably containing the OpEx spend around sales and marketing pretty well. And you're probably below 10% would be my guess, right? If you are one of those high transaction agencies who relies very heavily on a large throughput of clients, then you may be spending closer to 20%. Maybe that's your cap, right? And I think for a lot of traditional businesses, 20% could be seen as tolerable, but also they're probably selling products or services which are pretty high margin, right? So to contain what would be pretty hefty OpEx expenses. So let me just say this. I like 10% and under, unless you're going to promise me really dramatic growth rates. Um, I commonly use the rule of 40 in SaaS. I also use for professional service firms. I think that if you have 20% net operating income at the end of the year and you had 20% growth year over year on your top line revenue, that's a fantastic business. You're doing really well. If you had 30% net operating income and 10% growth, also fantastic. If you had 40% growth and no um, net operating income, which would be kind of shitty, but that would still be kind of good because you've basically said like we grew like gangbusters and that's where a lot of our dollars went, right? And if you're doing over that, that's even better. There are serious constraints when you're selling human capacity, and so that I kind of use as my rule of thumb. And so you could, if you're thinking about it that way, you could slide that number for sales and marketing up and down. But if I'm staying under 10% for us, we tend to grow 25 to 35% a year on our own business. We also drive a really good net operating income, at least in the current year. We have it in years previous. And so, that tends to work for us, and I think would work for most firms. Now, to get to the heart of your question, which took me a while to get there, how much of that is spent on sales? How much of that is spent on marketing? I just want to call out one folly I've seen often with our clients in particular is as marketing firms, they are obsessed with marketing their own firm. And they do not really invest in sales, whether that's not having a founder who is very sales heavy or sales confident, who is willing to own that revenue number, or could be that they don't even have a salesperson or someone who is really good at managing proposals and making sure that deals get signed. Like they've offboarded that responsibility to a PM or maybe an account manager who could be kind of junior. I think that's really dangerous, to be honest with you. Um, just because you do marketing for potentially a B2C company or many B2C companies, or even large B2B companies, look, at the end of the day, as professional service providers or agencies, we're in the B2B business. It's a very relationship intensive business. And so I would actually lean heavier on the sales side of things if I were to spend dollars than I would marketing. You may need certain assets or certain collateral or certain content strategies to make yourself relevant as a part of a broader conversation. So for us, if I think about the 10% of our sales and marketing budget, I would say probably, I don't know, 3% of it is spent on marketing if I had to like put a number on it. And then the rest is spent on sales because I have also an outbound sales strategy, which is controversial for some people. And I have senior sales people, which I rely on to get the job done. But those people own a number, and that is tied to their compensation. That is a big part of their performance. And now we're 7, 8 years into them owning that number and showing to me year after year they can continue to produce. And then on the flip side of that, I own revenue, or rather, I own new business development at our organization as a whole. So I have to own that with relation to our partners, right? So we've created this system which distributes responsibility um, accordingly. And it really empowers our individual team members to own certain areas of the sales and marketing function. And then they are held accountable to that. So that way they can all focus on their swim lane. They can continue to improve on that swim lane over time. And then they come back to the business or me or whoever it may be and report on their performance, right? And then the business communicates back, we need to go faster, we need to go slower, we need more time to hire. I mean, these are the things that you see all the time behind the scenes. And that's just really how it works, right? And that's why our other partners are focused on client service, and we have another partner focused on hiring. And so that works well. Um, it's if you are looking though to just solve sales and marketing problems in an ad hoc manner, that's not going to work well, right? And so I guess maybe that is a good tie into me asking you. Um, I'm sure you've had many conversations with founders or owners, maybe better said, who say, I have a sales problem. I'm so tired. I can't find any clients. I think I'm going to hire this person for 150 or 175 or 200 grand. And they are just hoping it's a panacea. It's something that fixes all their problems. And you say what to that person when they ask you that question?
Well, normally they're asking, should I hire them at a salary or should I pay them a commission? And I mean, I've seen both, and both can work. I get a little weary in the commission structure in a service-based business because you often have conflicting, competing, um, not priorities, but
Incentives in some ways, right? Like if I'm making like a perpetual commission, I can sit on that commission forever, and then I'm not going out and find a new business. And now my salespeople, as the owner, aren't working like I need them to, right? So we have contradictory incentives, and we are not aligned from a growth perspective, right?
yeah, or they're selling work that like a lot of our agencies want to do certain cool passion project type of work, and they're going out and selling just like pretty run of the mill type of creative work that the team doesn't actually want to do. So there can be conflicting incentive. Yeah, a lot of friction there. Um, and then so to get back to your question, what do I say to them? So it depends. It depends on how big they are. Often we're looking for more of a lead gen and less of a full-time salesperson, so that when they're faced with these issues, to fill the top line revenue, I'm often asking them what activities they're currently doing. Are they going to conferences? Where are their client, like their clients gathering? Are they going to like a not-for-profit conference that we can also get involved in, and be a sponsor of? Are they in a Slack community? We work with Slack communities. Are they do they have a Slack community of not-for-profits, or where are the people that you're trying to sell to? Where are they gathering, and how can we get in the room? They're also going and talking to their past network and connections. But it's it's challenging from like an advisory standpoint because we're just looking at the model and seeing, okay, can this business support? And it's such a gamble to take the risk on a salesperson.
I want to call out something that I think is really important that you just mentioned, and it's important to distinguish that a lot of our clients come to us with what they see as a lead gen problem, not necessarily a sales problem. Is that a fair distinction?
Yes.
Yeah. And what do you what are your thoughts on that? Because I mean, as someone who owns revenue, I look at them as one and the same, right? Like if I can't generate a conversation, then I never get to earn the right to actually propose anything. And so I have to answer for that. And you could argue that that's where marketing dollars should be spent. I think that's a respectable argument. But if lead gen was as easy as I can just put dollars in and get leads out, anybody could do this, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have seen it work with like a PR type of firm that or an individual contractor that they're hiring, and that contractor has connections at lots of different Fortune 500 companies, and they're getting them meetings and getting them in the door. It takes at minimum 12 months to see a payoff from that, an ROI on that, because it just takes a while to see any return on it, and they're paying monthly. And what I often see is they invest in it for like 9 months, 10 months, and then they're like, well, we're not getting any value out of that. And then they cut the spend. And then eventually they see, oh, that actually did return. We did get a meeting because of this agency or this PR firm. Um, so that's what clients are often talking about when they're thinking of lead gen, is like somebody going in and getting them in the room with the people that they're looking to get in the room with.
Um, I I sometimes have a hard time. I shouldn't admit this out loud, but I sometimes have a hard time taking owners seriously when they present the problem to me such that, well, if somebody could just get me a conversation with the right buyer, then I could take it over from there and then I can run a great business. Um, because I just fundamentally have an issue that if if you were able to run an adequate business, you wouldn't have that problem, right? There are a couple things I want to pick apart that you said that I think are important to understand. And one of the topics we talked about before we hopped on here was, or one of the questions I should say was, how long do you give someone to show result, whether that's a contractor or a full-time hire? Now, something that I say quite often with our clients today, and they're probably sick of me hearing this, or sick of hearing this from me, is that in professional service firms, sub $10 million, which is most of our client base, outcome tends to lag effort by about a quarter. And that's especially true as it relates to sales and marketing. And so if I'm doing a marketing campaign today, I would not expect that to yield a quote unquote lead, um, let alone maybe a qualified lead, but really a worthy prospect that I booked a meeting with, and maybe I'm going to go about a qualification call. I would expect that to take about 3 months, right? So anything I'm doing, I know today, I'm really, if today's, beginning of June, I'm thinking much more that it's going to show up on the scoreboard for us in September, right? And but that helps inform my thinking. That helps inform my investments. That helps inform where I spend my time. And it's why we're always trying to book everything out as far as possible so that we can actually make the investments of time today go out even further. In a perfect world, what I'm doing today would impact October or November, because that would just give me more time to yield the result I need to, or enable me to take bigger risk or bigger bets, right? And we can talk about that later. So, at a minimum, I think any strategy which an owner tries, you have to give it 3 months unless there are red flags galore when you bring this person in. And if there are red flags galore, you got to fire them right away. Whether that's a service or a individual, whether that's a full-time person or someone as a contractor, right? Now, what I tell those who are considering hiring a full-time salesperson who is probably going to do a little thought leadership, who's probably going to show up to events, who's probably going to try to shake the trees loose and do lead generation and get deals through the pipeline, and close them. I think you're probably looking at like 6 to 12 months to determine if that person is adequate at the role you hired them for. Any shorter than that, I feel as if they have not been given enough time. Any longer than that, they have been given time to show performance, and they've probably proven now repeatedly that they just can't drive the business that they need to drive. The number one indicator that I'm always looking at as a sales professional, excuse me, is velocity in my pipeline. So I'm always concerned about how many conversations are we creating and how many of those are jumping over to a qualified status, right? That's always an indicator to me that we are initiating conversations in the right place. We are using the right sort of tactics from a marketing perspective. And if I see that velocity decline, then I know that, hey, we may need to rethink some things. We may need to change our investment. But those are the things I'm constantly worried about, because I know if I can get a deal to a qualified stage, and I think it's true of most organizations, there's a pretty good chance I'm gonna get to proposal. There's a pretty good chance if I get to proposal that we're gonna win it, right? And I don't want to get too nitty gritty on like managing pipelines because that's not the point of this. But like if I can get to, and we use BANT for qualification, so budget, authority, need, and timing. If I can figure those things out from a quote unquote lead or prospect, and they're engaged in conversation, like I think we can get to a proposal or a pitch opportunity or whatever that may be, right? And at that point, it's 50-50 or better, unless it's just a big situation where I'm pitching against five of our other firms, and it's a big Fortune 500, and that we have many clients who do that too. That obviously carries more risk. But and there's a whole podcast that could be made on the art of pitching. But that's where we need to get if we can. And so if I were to really to like backtrack on that and highlight the biggest risk of any of our business owners, especially those who are working on those high throughput clients. It's, can they repeatably produce leads in their pipeline? And if they cannot, they should maybe look at full-time employment somewhere, right? Like, it's just that's what it comes down to. Like, think about like the financial hierarchy of needs. Like, once you've nailed everything, it's a predictable revenue generation. And if you can't do that, that is not really a problem that you can offboard to someone else as an owner. You have to own that as an owner, in my experience. Don't you think?
I agree with you. I think that's a really difficult thing to come to the realization of as a business owner.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I always used to love like the Hell's Kitchens and the Kitchen Nightmare and all those types of shows. Like, it's like the equivalent of a chef who doesn't want to be responsible for the restaurant they started, like the business side of it. But it's like, hello, you're no longer just a chef. You're now a business owner. You're a restaurant owner, right? Same for any creative who decided to spin up an agency. Um, your responsibility around running the business supersedes your responsibility as a creative, right? And so, because of that, any owner, in my opinion, any owner should be the primary salesperson until you get to probably $10 million a year in revenue,
I say that.
if I'm being honest, right? And so, this idea that we can offload responsibility to some hire for what is maybe the most important part of my entire business, whether that's an account person or a salesperson, to get net new logos, it's crazy. I just think that it's offloading your problems to someone else and saying like, oh well, they didn't do it for me, it's their fault, But I'm still a great business owner. I'm still a great creative. It's like, you're probably not, if I'm being honest with you. And that's a really hard conversation to have. But I think we've probably had it with many clients in the past, or maybe you have. Yeah. uh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
What do you mentioned something earlier about commission. How do you
Yeah.
feel about paying commission to salespeople in particular? And then we can talk about account people after that.
Yeah. I mean, I it's kind of that $10 million mark where you're not making it doesn't make sense to outsource to necessarily a salesperson because you can't pay them a good person enough money to bring them on. And then when you start paying them commission, we're just not the volume isn't there at the agency until we hit that somewhere between 8 and 10 million mark. It might be closer to 8 where it makes sense to bring on an additional full-time salesperson and pay them commission. But sub 8 million, it's just too expensive and you're not getting the right type of talent.
Yep. Yep. What is the right type of talent? Like, what does this person look like who's really good at sales within an agency?
Mm,
Because I think at the end of the day, I think this is the toughest question that our owners who are searching for that first sales hire or big sales hire, they
yeah.
have, there's so much crap out there in the marketplace. They're like, what does this person even look like, sound like? What is their track record? Where do they come from? How many years
Yeah.
of experience do they have?
They come from either another agency or they own their own business and they sold it and now they're looking for their next thing. And so that is like the persona that we're looking for when going to hire a salesperson, in my opinion. That's what I've seen be successful.
If someone comes to you in that interview process and they say like, hey, I'm just going to go knock on a bunch of doors, I'm going to go to a bunch of events, I need a really big budget for travel, I need a really big budget for dinners, stuff like that, are those warning signs to you, or are those just normal things that you have to do to drive business?
Normally, I'm the one saying, "Hey, I look at about 6% of revenue and say we need to be spending about 6% on sales and marketing activities."
Hmm.
And it's usually me pushing them to spend more money on sales and marketing and not necessarily the other way around.
Oh, really? So your clients are not spending enough on sales and marketing then?
Right. And we're allocating, like if the owner is spending half of their time on sales and marketing, we're allocating half of their fully loaded salary to that percentage. Like the labor costs are sitting in there, but
Okay.
they're often not, in my opinion, not spending enough on sales and marketing efforts.
So that's really interesting because I would think the opposite. I would think some of our owners are probably spending too much time or money, or they're paying too many consultants to help them find more business. But what you're saying is the clients of yours that tend to struggle are the ones that aren't prioritizing sales and marketing enough.
Yes. Because it's an easier when you start when the business starts to decline and we're saying, "Okay, the team's not busy, the team's not fully utilized, the sales and market here's our sales and marketing spend and the consultant spend." It's easier for owners to be like, "Well, let's just cut the sales and marketing consultant and not cut the full-time team." And so, yes, I often see that they're not spending enough money on.
But that's also the equivalent of saying like, "Hey, my health isn't doing very well. I think I'm just gonna stop exercising because it's just getting in the way of my ability to take care of my health," right? Yeah, like you can't sales and marketing in particular is the thing that you can never stop, in my opinion. Like there is no, hey, we'll do it for a little bit and then we'll stop. We'll do it for a little bit and then we'll stop. Like that is a recipe for disaster. That is exactly what leads to peaks and valleys within your client portfolio or your monthly P&Ls. The best agencies that I work with today in our portfolio are absolutely relentless about sales and marketing, whether that's within the current client base or net new clients. And actually, the ones who display this the best are clients who have multiple partners, and all of those partners, at least the majority of them, I'll say, are working to the bone on sales and marketing, right? They may have one partner who's kind of like a SME and working on delivering service, or fine tuning the delivery team, whatever that looks like. But they are absolutely relentless on sales and marketing. Those are the highest performing agencies that I interact with today. And I think most agency owners underestimate the amount of effort and time allocation they should be spending on sales and marketing individually, or that their organization should be spending on sales and marketing as a whole. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Very, very fair. Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so if I'm an owner and I'm not doing enough, like what are the first what do I need to do? Like what are my first steps? Am I sitting down and just like let me put together a plan and then I'm holding myself accountable to that plan on a weekly or monthly basis?
That's a start, right? I mean, in lieu of not having a plan at all, you definitely need to create one, and you need to hold yourself accountable to that plan and its performance over time. And this is if I think about Upsource 7 or 8 years ago when I got very involved with the business again, and we were literally a tenth of the size that we are right now. Um, Actually, a little bit less. I had to put together a plan, right? There was no expectation for what we would do from a revenue perspective or a growth perspective. There was no expectation for when we would achieve those goals. And there was no expectation around the strategy or the tactics that we would deploy to realize those goals, right? And I think any good sales and marketing leader or revenue leader is able to paint that picture and show over time repeated performance at meeting those goals, no matter the tactics or no matter the strategy that is deployed with their organization. And so, I don't have super strong feelings around like once you have that plan in place, you go on your merry way and you start trying to book meetings, whether that's through really great marketing techniques, whether that's pay-per-click ads, whether that's speaking at conferences. I think those things tend to be agency or brand or owner specific because every owner is like good at something in particular, right? Like some of them are just really great speakers. Some of them are introverts, but they're really good at running online ad campaigns. And so they use that to generate interest in their business. That's definitely true of kind of like the high transaction volume agencies. Some of them are just rainmakers. Like they know a lot of people in the industry, right? And they're notable in the industry. I think that's true of like PR firms, right? A lot of PR firms that are on our client roster are like that. Um, some of them come from a sales background. So like I come from a sales background. So I've done marketing as well, but I come from primarily managing salespeople. And so day one at Upsource, when I came back, I was like, we're going to deploy this outbound sales strategy. And I don't know exactly how much of it'll make of our number overall, but I know it'll be significant. And so I basically typed out the blueprint that to be followed. We had a team member who's now, basically a director at our company, follow that blueprint. By the way, he's still following that blueprint 8 years later. We actually have a full-time hire dedicated to it underneath him following that blueprint. And for 7 to 8 years in a row, it has made up 40% of our top line revenue, right? Repeatedly. And so as we earn the luxury to hit our goals and to have a little bit of breathing room, and I could now start to look at out 3 months, 4 months, 5 months at a time, it wasn't until then that I actually invested in marketing, because I knew in those early days we just didn't have the time to invest in marketing. Because I would expect, honestly, the sales activities I was expecting 3 month lead time. Marketing activities is farming, right? It's more like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It depends on your sales cycle, but like it just takes more time. It was we didn't hire our first marketing person until what, 3 years ago, maybe, at Upsourced. We've been around for 13 years, right? So like I knew that any marketing dollars spent before then would just not be useful for us, but now they are. Like marketing drove almost half of our business last year, right? I've only knew that because I've been through this a lot. But now what we do is we manage our portfolio. That's how I always think about it. We have goals that we set at the beginning of the year, and you're part of that process. We have a strategy that we've put in place for a number of years now, which is Upsource is going to focus on digital agencies or creative firms, which are anywhere from $2 to $50 million a year in revenue, but our sweet spot's probably 2 to 10, right? Okay, cool. We're going to offer them accounting, financial advisory. We've added tax, we've added M&A, right? So we've expanded that service strategy over time. So that's what I'm working with from a strategy perspective. And now I'm going to pick certain channels where I think we have a right to play, to communicate our message, and that honestly, like our personnel are just good at. And I think that's a lot of what goes overlooked as well. Like, don't hire a I'm gonna make a stupid analogy. Don't hire like a hockey player and have them play baseball, right? Like hire someone if you want to lead with the strategy, that's fine. But when you go to hire that salesperson, they better fit into that strategy or the tactics you want to deploy. Or maybe you don't have an idea of what channel. Maybe you don't want to be event heavy. Maybe you don't want to be pay per click heavy, whatever that is, but you meet someone who has an extreme talent for one of these things and you bring them in. Now let them do that thing, right? So that's basically what we've done. And so now we manage a portfolio from an acquisition perspective, which is a little bit of outbound, a little bit of marketing, which we just kind of generically call it inbound, and then we manage within the scope of that many marketing activities. We actually have a fairly robust referral program that's done very well for us, and we have a fairly robust influencer program, which kind of equates to referrals, but basically these are external relationships, which are not clients today, right? And then, of course, we have partnerships, more formal partnerships with organizations. And so all these things in my portfolio are driving business all the time. And I'm constantly looking to see within our attribution, what's working, what's not, and where should I invest in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And I'm also thinking about, like, I talk to our Jimmy, our head of sales, about this often. Is like, I'm thinking about 2 to 3 years down the road right now, right? Because if I bring in a hire, going back to what I said earlier, if I brought in a new sales hire, the person needs 6 to 12 months to show anything, in my opinion, in my experience, right? So if I want to hit certain revenue goals in 2027, I'm going to hire that person at the beginning of 2026 because I want them to get integrated in our culture. I want them to understand our go to market. I want them to understand our buyer, sharpen their skills. And so 2026 may be a little bumpy for them, but by 2027, I need them fully scaled, right? I'm not going to hire that person on Jan 1, 2027 and say, hit my number. It's not reasonable. And I think a lot of our owners or agencies do that, and they expect that person to solve all their problems. And business of any kind, in my experience, unless you're very lucky, does not work that way. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep. I agree.
So, in summary, what do we have here? Don't hire an external salesperson until you're pushing 10 million. There are probably some exceptions to that. So don't add us in the comments if you hate what we said. As a general rule of thumb, I would love to see sales and marketing spend, if it's performing efficiently, under 10%, but certainly over 6%. Is that fair? Like that just means you're not investing enough.
Yep.
Okay. I dig that. Account team, we didn't talk a lot about my preferred model, which is an agency who has a couple clients, but they're pretty big, right? Like that's what I would prefer if I was running an agency.
From a risk standpoint, I shy away from
Absolutely. And you just drive better margins to those clients. You're probably not paying your account people big commissions. I would love to see an 80-20 split of current business versus net new business. I think that's a healthy mix. But again, it does depend on whether you're a very high transaction volume or your low transaction volume. So, you said 70-30. I think that's perfectly acceptable for high transaction volume. Um, but I would love to be very account focused as an agency owner, because it's just so much easier for me to find new revenue in current accounts. It is so hard, especially in the world you teed it up at the beginning. Like it's hard to find opportunity right now. It's a weird economy. AI is doing disruptive things that's causing a lot of caution in the marketplace. People are pulling projects or they're pushing them out further. Like if I can just hunker down with current clients and then just solve their problems and then find new departments and I already have the MSA in place, like, whew, that's a way better place to live. It's a way more secure place to live, especially during times like these. But I understand not everybody has that luxury. On the sales side, what I would say to owners is don't feel like you can offload your problems to an external party, whether that is a contractor, a full-time hire that is now internal, or a service firm, a booking firm, whatever the hell they're called. I don't know. If you are in a position where you think you're just going to offload your problems to them, phew, good luck. Like you probably need the Gordon Ramsay treatment after that. You got to come in and have some serious conversations, right? Because it's just not going to work that way. And not to say that there aren't some people who catch lightning, but more times than not, that's not going to solve your problems, right? I think a lot of those problems are inward. They sit with the owner, they sit with the leadership team, and I think you got to ask yourself some tough questions before you go externally to make some of those investments. All right, what else did I miss? What else is the summary of this conversation?
no, I think you hit it. That was it. You got it.
Good. All right. So I wish everyone lots of luck in booking those meetings and qualifying those deals and getting those proposals out or winning those pitches. Meredith and I will probably tackle this topic again. There's a lot of great content to come out of like kind of the subtopics that we discussed today, but we know this is top of mind for many owners, both clients we work with today and those that are out there universe. Hope you found some value. And until next time, thanks, everybody.